We've got Anil Vishwanathan here.
Quite simple. It is about an experience that the consumer receives, right, in return for what the consumer pays, and it is an experience. It goes beyond just the tangible and includes the intangible, and it's a little bit more holistic. There's an element of emotion in it. There's an element of functional in it. But it's the holistic experience that a consumer receives, and in many ways, you want to ensure that that experience is unique, is different from other experiences that the consumer may have access to or may have tried in the past. Right? And really, the whole fun of branding and hence marketing is how do you ensure that that experience is so unique that the consumer is willing to pay for it and pay more and more for it. And that's really the fun of branding and marketing. But as simple as an experience that you provide. Yeah, I mean, obviously you can speak using Dairy Milk as a simple reference because I think many people who listen to this are possibly well aware of Cadbury Dairy Milk.
Everyone is.
And I think, and it's a very interesting experience, right? So if you ask a consumer what is a chocolate, right? And in India, it's very interesting. People use Cadbury and chocolate interchangeably. So it happens when brands become large and represent a category. So Cadbury is short code for chocolate, or Maggi is short code for noodles, or Kurkure is short code for a snack. So when you ask a person, what is a chocolate? He says it's brown in color and it's sweet. Not too many people in the country still know the notion of cocoa and the fact that it is cocoa and milk and fat that comes together. Instinctively, they say it's chocolate and sweet. And this is something that we've known for years, right? But sometime in around 2002, 2003, after a period of about 6-7 years when chocolate was not growing, people have said, how do you get people to eat more chocolate? Easier to get people to eat more chocolate or get more people to eat chocolate. Because today it's an expensive snack and not everybody can afford it. There's a lot of headroom. A lot of people don't eat chocolate. So chocolate finally is alien to our culture, right? It didn't exist 2 generations before. It came in with the English, right? So we're still trying to teach people. So there's no need. And first of all, it's not a need. It's a want. Yeah. If I don't eat chocolate today, I won't die. But you want to create that want. You want to create that desire, right? So it's an alien taste. You want to create a desire for it. Right? And obviously, it's been a slow process. And through the mid-90s and early 2000s, we're trying to see how do I get people to eat more chocolate. Those who know chocolate, they know it. And those who know about it and don't eat it, they don't eat it. And then when we were talking about the insight, we said, so it's chocolate and it's sweet. And then something clicked in a group meeting, in a group forum at that point of time among the leaders there. They said, sweet is nothing but meetha. Right? So why isn't chocolate a meetha? Right? And if you were to just reframe it to say it's not so much about getting people to eat more chocolate, but getting people to eat chocolate as a meetha, then suddenly you see that there's a whole space of meetha that people are eating. And meetha is, again, there's a physical of it which is sweet, and there's a feeling of it which is sweetness.
Yes.
Which it stands for, right? And if you're able to leverage that and leverage all the myriad stories around sweets and start placing Dairy Milk in it, where can that take, and what journey can that take? And that's been our journey on Kuch Meetha Ho Jaye, which we started from 2004, and we kind of transformed the category post that, because then people started realizing, this is a meetha. So yes. I can use it in a festival, I can give it in a birthday, I can use it for, even today, I mean, you hear stories of Ganpati and chocolate modaks and all of that we keep hearing, right? So you see how the category is becoming more and more getting ingrained into our culture, right? Like now in Calcutta, we do a very nice running for many years where we're really trying to position chocolate as a mishti.
I know.
Right? And all those attempts to say get chocolate closer into the consumer's life, and once you do that, then again you start building onto the meanings on the brand, which then goes beyond just the taste of chocolate. Now today it represents sweetness and all the feelings that are linked to sweetness. Shared good feelings, the feeling of generosity, the feeling of goodness, the feeling of warmth, the feeling of happiness, and hence any time in the day, it's now very easy for you to create that feeling that I should eat a Cadbury. Obviously, trust is something that is built over time. It's not something that you can create overnight. And it is obviously an outcome of a degree of reliability that you build over a period of time, the level of consistency and dependability that you create so that over a period of time you represent a set of attributes, a set of values that are consistent, so that when I go to you, I know that I can trust you. So it's that kind of mutuality of relationship that comes over a period of time based on a element of dependability and consistency. Early on, when you're building brands, this help, and you know this well as a researcher, Kalyan, that anybody would try, but repeat is always a very interesting measure of long-term growth arising out of consistency, leading up to trust. So there's, I think, the element of repeat and the element of consistency, and hence when we start small also, what gives us confidence that something that starts small becomes big is really what you look for is repeat. And the second point around trust, as we said, it's kind of linked to brand building. That every time you provide that consistent experience, if you're able to add a layer of storytelling on it, where you're then able to build on that experience so that the consumer buys into a story behind the product or behind that, so that elevates the experience. And the consumer is consuming that, going through that experience, is able to relate to the story. And I think in today's day and age, that is emerging as a very nice theme for home chefs, digital brands, what we all call insurgent brands, and the pressure that's coming on to large brands like the ones that we manage is really, are you able to create that story, that authenticity of that experience, which then people are buying into. And once they buy into it, they're buying because it is creating, in effect, trust, because that's a story that they want to believe in. One within the company is Bournvita, right? And the storytelling that you try to do, of course, Bournvita has such a big legacy over the years, but more recently, over the last 10 years, the story that we are trying to build around not just the fact that Bournvita reinforces the milk and makes it into a nice experience, which is milk and the goodness of Bournvita together, but converting that into a ritual for the mother and child, and for the mother to feel that that ritual is an important element in the preparation of the child's success. And the child to believe that this ritual is an important step towards success. That laddering up to this whole space of preparation, or Tayari Jeetki, as we call it in Bournvita. Yes. And then and this notion that nothing comes easy, and that this ritual and preparation is so important and crucial, that at the moment when the test comes, what helps you succeed is the preparation that's gone on over a period of time. That is the kind of meaning that you're laddering it, right? So that the person believes that it's not so much about just the fact that it's milk which is reinforced with Bournvita, but it's an element which then becomes part of life, because it's an attitude that you want to build and you want to relate to. I like the name because it kind of blends with it. So you call it storytelling and story doing.
I love it.
And to say that one is what I tell, right? But in order for me to resonate, I also need to do something about it. So if I stand for generosity, I need to do something about it, which says that why am I saying generosity is important? What am I doing about it? Right? So today, for years, if Dove has been talking about real beauty, if they are now talking about stereotypes, now they are trying to do something about it. But again, you have to do something about it. Right? And sometimes doing starts by inspiring, because every change starts with awareness, then leading up to change. But the consumer will see through if you're just telling a story as against you actually doing things. Home is becoming more fun. And hence, if going out was fun earlier, now the onus is on us now to make home more interesting. Those of us who are the Gen Y, Gen Xers, who knew home was fun, and there was really not too many options going out if you're in a middle class family. And I think that notion has come in post COVID. Rituals are re-emerging. Moments of connection are re-emerging. In general, anxiety and stress levels are higher, so the desire to take a break and reconnect is becoming more important. The kitchen is becoming more important in the house. More people are going in with a greater degree of confidence and coming out with smiles. They're seeing that as a great opportunity to bond with their children. I think definitely with the advent of food delivery and all the multiple apps, it's easy to procure material, procure stuff. So in the past, if it's difficult for you to do something which is Lebanese, or you want to try something which is authentic Chinese, you would never get those ingredients. Today, all of them are available on a click. So you want to do something which is really a nice Thai green curry, which is authentic, you can get all of those ingredients. And then you realize, hey, it's not so difficult. It's probably 25 minutes. All it requires is an openness and experimental approach, and the reward that it's generating for the creator. Typically, we talk about any activity and this point around consistency and repeat. The reward has to be concomitant and instantaneous, right? Now, this element of being home and cooking has an instant reward, that is gratification at home and your ability to share and gain endorsement amongst those who matter to you, right? That ability for instant rewards is also allowing this to blossom aggressively. So I think that's this broad trend around home. And the other interesting thing around local, right? You're definitely seeing a big, and you're hearing so many people talk about it in different ways, right? OTT talking about regional languages. We talk about Google, Facebook talking about language searches. We are seeing, this whole emergence globally also. The famous Korean director received the Oscar award saying, "Look beyond the half inch," right? And how subtitling is now exploding content across the world. You see this trend around relatable local. So there's a degree of authenticity that local experience stands for, right? But you're able to engage with it and relate to it because it's all about that experience, right? Okay. Now, imagine India. Imagine the cultural richness we've got. Imagine the diversity that we've got, right? Just the sheer diversity and what it can create and what it can provoke. And we've always believed in India because we are a culture that has grown up on stories, right? If you're able to retell a classic, nothing sells like that. Nothing sells like retelling of a classic. Right? We had this whole campaign around Shubharambh.
Yes.
This is a very old-fashioned line. मेरी माँ हमेशा कहती थी कोई भी शुभ काम करने के पहले कुछ मीठा खा लेना चाहिए अच्छा हो.
Yes.
But it became so topical and so pop culture because you're in an age-old custom of a mother saying eat something sweet before you go because then it'll be good. But you give it a modern spin and people go ballistic about it. Right? So I think this ability to retell classics and just mine into the cultural diversity of the country is just fascinating. So especially in the context of food, it'll explode. You're already seeing it explode. So we started this whole notion called Madbury, create your own Cadbury. Typically, we used to launch new flavors every year. So from 2 years back, we started saying, you tell us what you want. And
like the pan flavor I came across.
Like the pan flavor, right? So last year we launched Panjeer and mint. This year we're launching, and we're getting 1 million entries.
Wow.
We're just giving 23 ingredients, 3-4 chocolate muscles, and 2-3 types of nuts, and just go wild. Bhujia and Cadbury, and Gulkand and Cadbury, and coconut.
Professor Madbury.
Anything you can make, right? And just see the excitement and just the excitement on saying. And we took this. We said it's a very nice digital concept. A couple of years back, pre-COVID, we started doing stalls, right? We did a stall in Comic Con. We did a stall in a massive Reliance shareholder meet. Just the notion that there's a bunch of ingredients in this chocolate. We said, make your own and publish it, put it on Facebook. People go mad. They didn't realize it's just so much fun. I'm making my own Cadbury, and you can, dilute the quantity, mix whatever you want. You can go mad. I think it doesn't matter what I do. Any problem, we've learned a very simple way to solve that problem, and we break it up into 2 simple steps. Call it where to play and how to win. Your first focus is where to play. Where do I play? So if I'm going to start as a home chef, all I need to understand the space. You figure out there are myriad opportunities. So you need to structure the space in a way so that you understand what the space is, and then pick up something that you're really passionate about. Right? So if I'm passionate about vegetables and mainstream food, mainstream Indian food, it will take me in a certain direction. If I'm good in meats and non-veg, it will take me in a certain direction. If I'm a dessert maker, it's going to take me in a certain direction. So, where to play? So frame the market and be clear about where to play. Once you're clear about where to play, that means you know who your core consumer is. Know your consumer. Again, myriad things you can do. It's very easy. The starting point, if the starting point becomes, what should I do? You always get confused. We typically get this question in media interactions with the marketer. What should brands do? What should brands do? And I keep responding. It's not about what should brands do. What does the consumer want?
Correct.
So where to play? Get your segment clear. Know what your consumer wants. That's what I would do first. That's my homework. And then, of course, bring your complete soul into how to win. So understand what is in it that you will provide that makes you distinct, that you can do consistently, that you can wake up in the morning and do, and not crib or not feel sad about. You know that you can consistently deliver over a period of time. You can scale up if you want to, if the desire, if the soul need comes. And those are the areas around how to win. So how can I win credibly better than others? What will make me distinctive? What will make me differentiated? That will be my success. Simple mantra for success. There's no magic formula. Where to play, how to win. I think once I know my clear how to win, and my how to win, I should be able to articulate it in a way that can inspire everything that should come out of it. The set of ingredients that I use, the kind of cuisine that I make, the kind of pricing that I go for. It should also become very clear what I can't do or what I won't do. So I will not be the Shetty Snacks who will also give me uttapam and give me vada pav and give me
pizza.
Pizza, right? So, obviously he is catering. He's very clear about his right to play. Right? There's somebody who's hungry and wants a good experience out of home. He's going to give you whatever he wants. Right? He doesn't want you to go anywhere else. So that's Shetty play. Again, very clear right to play. So I think the how to win, once it's clear, it should influence every single thing that you do, that your brand represents, so that the experience is holistic.
Right.
So then it covers every element, right? So it covers the name that I choose. So it has both the what I would call the functional basic attributes, and also then talk about the benefits and what kind of benefits they provide. Right? And if I have the confidence, if I have my where to play clear, then I know that taste is important. Right? Then I don't get swayed by the 1,000 articles of how people are going crazy about health and how they're doing 100 push-ups every day, because I know that it matters. Right? Once I know clearly, then then it allows me to make those choices very clearly across the various elements. I think the moment we start thinking about the fact that it's the experience and it's not just what I make, but it's the entire experience that defines me, then really it's about deconstructing all the elements of that experience and putting time and working on it step by step. To say all of it needs to come together.
Right.
And then it's really about working on it step by step. And hence, and we spoke about earlier in the chat about this whole need for consistency and everything coming together in a holistic way. So I think this notion of integration that we believe in, so that every facet that you experience me should reflect the same meaning, should reflect the same, should feel the same way, should communicate the same thing. So that's what I would call packaging. I mean, otherwise packaging can be misconstrued as the cosmetics.
Correct.
But if you were to think about how I package my experience, so that every single touch point,
Correct.
from the time the consumer sees my video to the time the consumer receives my product, and the way he receives it, when he opens it, how it should look and how it should feel, all of it comes together as packaging for me. It's kind of all the moments of truth. Yes. The first, second, and third moment of truth, as we say, every touch point, absolutely.
Right.
I think the first and most important skill would be, counterintuitive to what you might think, but I would really pick up analytics. so that I can read data, so that they can understand my consumers better on a constant basis. So I understand I have the great opportunity today to get more and more information about them.
Right.
A, who they are, B, what they like about me. So I think one is analytics, so that I can clearly analyze, make clear choices around defining my way to play, as I keep saying, right? I think that's a lot of it is based on data. It's not feel based. It's not about I think these kind of people like me or like my food. I will know very clearly who likes my brand, why they like my brand across the funnel, right? You know the whole funnel operating. So who's coming to my site, who's listening to my videos, who's buying into my products, who's repeating, who's not, who's saying good things, who's saying bad things. So that requires a lot of analysis. That comes from a desire for problem solving, sitting with data, looking at it, analyzing it. So analytical skills, complemented by, of course, creativity and the desire to go mad, the willingness to fail, the willingness to experiment, know that sometimes you might fail, but really through which you create something which is uniquely yours. This requires an element of creativity. I think these two are the kind of the most important things. And of course, you would aspire for basic level of skill sets, I'm sure. So I'm sure all of our home chefs are extremely accomplished in what they're doing. And just kind of, I would definitely do enough research to know how my area is, my particular focus space is evolving, and ensure that there's an element of expertise there that I would pick up. I think there's this notion even in marketing or anywhere else to say that whatever needs to be learned has already been written. It's all about going back into history and learning. So I think there's an element of learning and the humility to say that what you're doing is not something that hasn't been done before. So it's just about your version of it. Once you know everything about it, you're able to present it in a much more of an authentic way, in your way. The most important successful mantra is having a good ecosystem. Nothing that we have created has been created by me alone or by my team alone. At least in Cadbury, we have created, in Mondelez, we have created an ecosystem where we're very proud of the ecosystem that we've created. We often, people from outside come and say, we don't know who's the client and who's the agency, because we are in it together, we all own the brand together. So I think it's an ecosystem, an ecosystem of passionate people who take ownership in what they do, and people don't compartmentalize saying, I do this, you do that, I manage creative, you manage business, I manage media, I manage digital, I manage product development. Everybody can do everything. And there's an element of ownership. And of course, this ecosystem is also a thriving, successful ecosystem, where you know that you really are working with the best in the industry that way. And of course, it comes over time, and there's a legacy. And hence, I keep telling myself every day that there's a legacy I've received, and the most important thing I should do is not screw it up.